Namaste. Welcome to Bhoom of Bharat with Rama Shivkumar, which each week we are talking about, what's happening in the GCCs world. So today we have Naozer, who is the CEO of Alldigi. So hi Naozer, welcome to Bhoom of Bharat. And it's a pleasure to have you here on the podcast and hear about your experiences.
Good morning, Rama. Thank you so much for having me. For a start, let me congratulate you on starting your entrepreneurial journey. It's always a pleasure to see old colleagues, trying to do what their heart desires and grow in life. So many congratulations again.
Thank you so much, Naozer. He has always been a kind of, guiding me and, encouraging me. So I would request Naozer to introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, Rama, I've been into the banking and the business process outsourcing space, including running a captive in the middle part of my career. I've been in this industry for the last 35 years, having graduated from the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad in 1990. Started my career with the Standard Chartered Bank in India for the first 16 years. Then moved across to the GCC of the Prudential in India. This is the UK Prudential, which is into life insurance and asset management. Spent 5 years with them, setting up their finance shared services center, including getting a lot of work from UK into India, including some of the more value-adding work at that point in time. Spent 5 years with them, my last role being with them as the executive director of the company in India. And then moved across to the Tata Group as the CEO of Enext Financials, which was a specialized BPO servicing the banking and financial services space with a large focus on running collections businesses, which is the feet on street across India for the last mile pickup of delinquent debt. Starting from that, moved across into Tata Business Support Services, which was a merger at the group level of Enext into a larger entity, Tata Business Support Services, where you also spent some time in that entity. And finally, of course, we had Quest Corp, which is India's largest diversified conglomerate and one of India's largest private sector employers, investing in Tata Business in end of 2017, at which point in time the entity was rebranded as Connect Business Solutions. Continued to spend time with Connect, leading the operations and portions of the sales, and moved across as part of a group transfer to Allsec Technologies in February 23. Just about an anniversary almost to the date. And since then have been, leading Allsec Technologies to the next level of its growth. We are India's largest payroll services provider, as also a niche and value-adding business process outsourcing company servicing customers in the US. We've gone through a rebranding exercise last year where we have rebranded ourselves from Allsec Technologies to Alldigi Tech, and that's what we are currently known as. I hope that gives you a bit of a quick canter into my background.
No, thank you so much. And, our audience is going to learn a lot about your experience. I think you mentioned about Enext. This was the first of its kind feet on street, which was started in India, and you started that. So, it'll be good if you could share some experiences or some examples with our audience.
Sure. No, to be absolutely honest, yes. No, I was not part of the founding team, but yes, I came in at a time in Enext, where we had to take Enext to the next level of its growth, next level of its profitability, next level of, attracting third-party customers. And we were hugely successful there. Banking, as you know, is a regulated business, and more so in recent times, when the RBI is very, very clear in terms of how it wants banks and NBFCs to operate its collections operations. The respect for the customer is very, very paramount in terms of, what the RBI is propagating. So Enext at that point in time, and now, Connect as a very, very sweet spot in terms of what we offer. So we are India's largest professionally run collections company in the country, with about 15,000 odd people, both on the street as also doing telecollections on in the contact center. So that's where we are. So what it gives us is it gives our end customer complete comfort on the operational risk, which is very much there in the collections operations. More importantly, reputational risk, because we follow completely ethical collections processes and practices, as the regulator would expect. So that's what we are, and we have of course moved the digital journey, yes, as part of not only, as I said, the contact center and the feet on street, but we have also done a digital app-based collection for the early bucket collections, where we reach out to customers in an omni-channel fashion, depending on how they want us to reach out to them. So whether it's through SMS, whether it's through a call, whether it's through WhatsApp, so that sort of helps us sort of minimize the intrusiveness, of collections process, which typically it could be, particularly for customers who may not have the intent to repay.
That changed the entire collection process. Being a CFO myself, I can relate back to this. And since you've led a lot of these large and complex transformations, what do you think today the GCC should have a capabilities so that they can be ahead of the game?
I mean, if you just rewind back in terms of, the evolution of GCCs in India, let's go back 20 years, yeah, where I think the GCCs, of course, people came into India for two reasons primarily. One is the cost arbitrage which India provides vis-a-vis costs in the parent country. And the second was, the availability of skilled talent, just because of India's demographic, just the large size of India's population. Both of them still remain. Both these factors still remain. I mean, for example, India has about 1.5 million graduates in STEM year on year, which represents a huge talent pool. Yeah, but what has happened, and that's also been true of the evolution of the BPM industry itself, right? So I mean, BPM itself, or even domestic or international third-party BPM, also started with largely the same drivers, the value drivers. So BPM itself has moved from BPM 1.0 to BPM 4.0 now, where we have moved away from, just doing, so initially started, as I said, with cost arbitrage, then it went a bit of cost plus, some bit of value addition, a lot more, complex work started coming to India. And I can take an example of my Prudential experience itself, where within finance, of course, we had the traditional AP/AR, but we also started looking at some of the more complex taxation work, for example, or actuarial. I mean, actuarial work in India, was one of the large processes which we tried to get from the UK into India. Again, the same reason, availability of talent and maybe a fraction of the cost, because, actuarial talent back in the UK onshore, is hugely expensive and not available also as we know it. So GCC stroke BPM version 2 was all about, cost plus some value add. BPM or GCC 3 or GCC 4 is all about transformation. Yeah. So, I mean, how do we transform the business? How do we ensure that we in India are in the driver's seat and, partner with the businesses back onshore to get and drive more strategic outcomes? Yeah. So, I mean, very goal oriented, very outcome oriented, and directly adding to the top line or the bottom line, of the parent organization.
And related thing is going to be another. You spoke about actuarial, and it's not just UK, US that we're talking about. I also see that in Australia. Right. A lot of insurance companies are there today. Europe after the COVID, a lot of focus is there on insurance, and actuarial is something which is very important. People never even used to talk about saying that can we move things for banking. Right. Today also question mark is there, can banking be done from India? But you've shown definitely an example of how things can be done. So all these things, when you're moving from a cost center to kind of today you were saying a business partner. So how has you been able to kind of convince the stakeholder? I'm sure there's not been an easy piece of cake. So maybe you want to share some experience around that.
No, you're absolutely right, Rama. So I think there is a cultural element, which one has to work on both sides, and more so in the originating country, because to be fair, there are job losses, there are the fact that, jobs moving to India. So that communication in the parent itself has to be handled very sensitively. And I mean, me as part of the, the leadership in India, which was getting the roles, but also was playing a part, in terms of that, to say that how do we ensure that that communication is done sensitively. Of course, a larger portion of that burden is borne by the sort of the HR and the other teams, and the change management teams of the parent. But I mean, we also have to play a part. The other part, of course, which we need to look at is to ensure that there is seamless transition. Yeah. So definitely you cannot have a situation, where, because let's understand, that there's a lot of tribal knowledge, which many of the individuals onshore would have got over many years. Yeah, so we have to build some processes around it. So when we were doing the transitions, we would look at how do we get SOPs written, How do we ensure, that those SOPs are constantly validated, signed off by the individuals who may be moving on from the organization completely or moving into another role, and then ensure that, once the process actually lands here, after a couple of months of, parallel runs and transitions, the output is seamless. Yeah, I mean, because that's been a key factor of and of course, to be honest, there will be some operational challenges, I mean, at times which we very quickly overcome. But that's the critical part, that how do we sort of treat this whole process with a huge bit of respect which is required? How do we ensure that the transition is seamless? And, the end business, because see, many of the things which work in India ultimately support the business back in the originating location. Yeah. So how does the business find the whole experience seamless? Yeah, so whether it's something is done, or let's say, for example, a finance report, whether it's done in the UK or whether it's done in India, as long as, it's seamlessly done, then the business is agnostic in terms of, where the delivery is out of.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And brought a very important point, which is the sensitivity, the respect. That's very important. So, you have seen today GCCs adding value there. Do you see a trend of AI, ML, the digital technologies of Business 4.0? Yesterday, we were there in that NASCOM summit, and there was a lot of discussion going on AI. And in fact, if you look at in the evening, the musician was also talking about AI.
It's not AI. There's no AI.
It's not AI. It's a real this thing. So how do you see that trend?
I think AI is here to stay. I mean, there are no two ways about it. But even before we get into AI, what we have also seen is that GCCs do a lot of very, very high end stuff. Yeah. So, for example, we have seen a number of engineering GCCs. Being set up in India. In fact, I was reading somewhere that a lot of the research, the data science work, a lot of that work gets done out of India, so it's not only about, so before AI, it's actually how GCCs have continued to evolve, into the significantly, evolved and complex work, out of India, so as I said, starting from very basic work maybe 20 years ago in HR, finance, to now, doing a lot of work in engineering or in terms of data analytics, data sciences. So that also means that we have to sort of recruit the right level of people, the right kind of people, so there are absolutely new job families arising in GCCs, yeah. So as I said, whether it's a data scientist or whether it's an ML scientist or whether it's an AI coordinator, so these are some of the newer job families which GCCs have to, evolve into and hire, and I think yesterday again in NASCOM a good point was made, whether, it means reskilling for AI or actually AI for reskilling, in terms of, how do you do that? So as we move up the value chain in terms of both the complexity of the work and of course, from a point of view of continuing to get the cost efficiencies, continue to get the transformation, AI will play a significant part of it, Now, as you know, India also is starting its own AI mission. Yeah. I mean, I think there are RFPs out, where people will form, and getting into some of, development of some of the LLMs and the SLMs which come about. So I think it's given. I mean, the fact that, AI will play an important and increasing part in terms of how GCCs develop and deliver their outcomes. Is a given, and there are no two ways about it.
Yeah, no. Thank you so much for this. The example, yesterday, people were talking about, and in the NASCOM summit, you see a lot of, focus there on the reskilling. Yeah. So, your company is predominantly in terms of also, a lot of talent that you guys are providing. So are you looking at also, so how are you looking at from a talent perspective? Because you guys are number one in this industry. Yeah. From a staffing and, talent perspective.
Sure. Talent is always, the right talent is always in short supply. Yeah. So, so we have to ensure that, that as an organization, we provide the right environment. Yeah. So happy to sort of let you know that both Quest Corp and, the subsidiary companies have been rated very, very highly in the Great Places to Work survey, which happens every year. As you know, it's. So, at one point in time, we were, we are now the last one, we were ranked number 32. Yeah, so we're in the top 100, So we do a lot of stuff to ensure that we provide people, fulfilling careers, a very, very supportive work environment, and of course, some of the hygiene factors are a given in today's environment. What we are also doing is we have set up a AI center of excellence. Yeah, and one of the remits of the person who heads that for us is also to look at the whole reskilling piece. Yeah, so how do we train our people? I mean, in terms of various facets of AI. So it's not only about learning to work with AI. Yeah, but it's also how do we collaborate with AI? How do we coordinate with AI? So those are some important elements in terms of where we sort of work with partners or internally to get suitable on the go learning programs. So many of these learning programs are pretty much self learning. I mean, web based or mobile based, so that people find it convenient to learn. And we also encourage people in terms of running internal champion challengers, league boards, and all of that, to ensure that we provide people enough motivation to learn, and of course we provide them the tools to do that.
So, interesting question. Now that you've led so much in rebranding, the latest being on the Alldigi tech. And how have you been still staying cool? And any experience you want to share to our audience? Because I think in the last 2 decades, if I hear that you're so many companies rebranding that you have kind of,
Yeah.
and
True,
always see
true.
you as a very cool and calm person.
Sure. No, yeah, yes, I think you're right. Now that you say it, I myself have gone through, various rebrandings of the organizations which I've been a senior leader of. So yeah, the latest one, of course, was undertaken, as I said, last year. So it started with actually getting a very, very consultative approach. Yeah. So what does the current brand stand for? What do you want the new brand to stand for? What are the options for the new brand? So of course we worked with in a small way with a digital marketing company. So we reached out. We did a couple of interviews. With our team members. We actually got our senior team members. My direct reports together. And brainstormed in terms of including what the potential new names could be. Yeah. So people felt that they were part of the process. They were consulted. And that they had an input into the final decision making. And then, of course, it was a very organic way how the name evolved, and what the name currently stands for is the fact that that we wanted to emphasize the importance of us as a digitally enabled or digital first organization, in the payroll services and the BPO space. So that's where the tech comes from, in that sense largely. And it also gives a bit of continuity, I mean, the first three letters, the all part of it gives a bit of continuity from our previous name, Allsec. And, so the name itself evolved very organically, in a very consultative process, with the team members. And then, of course, once we have decided that the name change is XYZ, then, of course, it's a very, it's a process-oriented stuff and getting approvals from the registrar of companies and filing some of those returns and all of that. And then, of course, once you get those approvals, the rebranding exercise, which is a more physical aspect in terms of name boards and all of that. And the softer element again, to get wider acceptance of the name within the organization. So we do stuff like maybe just rebranded new mugs or pens so that, it's wider disseminated into the organization. So those were some of the key things we would do.
So how do you still maintain your cool? I'm sure there's a lot of stress that, we all go through with all of these.
So I think all par for the course and part of the job.
Okay, no, thank you so much. And I would also say that cultural, is often a biggest challenge. You did refer about it when you talk. You've been working with a lot of different diverse culture organizations. Whether you're talking about Indian diverse culture or globally. So how do you see cultural playing a very important role? And what is the advice that you would like to give it to our audience on this, especially the new GCCs which are coming up?
No, I think I've been fortunate in that sense, where I've worked with multinationals. I've worked with Indian multinational in a sense, the Tata Group, which has strong focus on values and ethics. Very, very lucky to sort of, as that the same environment, the same focus on value ethics continues in Quest Corp, So, I mean, I've never really ever, to be very honest, in the 35 years of my career, having struggled to say that we need to do the right thing. Yeah. Whether we do the right thing for the employee, right thing for the customer, and right thing for the shareholders now, because, the whole shareholder focus, is very, very strong in the Quest world, because the earlier entities were either arms of multinational companies, or unlisted entities in India. So that's how I've always, driven myself and my teams, that does it stand the test, that is it the right thing to be done? Yeah, and as I said, there are three elements of doing the right thing, which is the triangle of stakeholders. Yeah, which is employees, shareholders, and customers, and of course the wider ecosystem. Yeah, which is also a very, very strong element, across all my organizations. Tata's, of course, we are aware in terms of the work which they do in the
Yeah.
in the CSR space. So does Quest. I mean, so
Yep.
that's really the fourth element, or the fourth stakeholder, which sort of which we all work towards.
Yeah. A
So
lot of time people don't, focus on people or on CSR, but I
yeah,
think that's a good example that you have,
yeah, so we
kind
have to
of.
have that triangle, and then that CSR bit is underlying the triangle,
Uh-huh.
which we all need to work towards, and keep striking the balance,
Okay.
And of course, there are decisions at times, where we would sort of tilt more one towards the other. But those are individual anecdotal decisions, But I
Yeah.
mean, over a period of time, there has to be an equilibrium, and one can't be done without the other.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
for example, if you don't have an happy employee, I don't think you can have happy customers.
Yeah.
If you don't have happy customers, I don't think you can get the returns to make shareholders happy. So over a long period of time, all three have to be working in tandem and in equilibrium.
Sure, sure. So, just the last question here, Naozer. If you think, what do you like to have one key takeaway for the, future GCCs which are coming to set up in India?
India is a growing is a growing economy, right? With all uh, the incentives, which many governments are giving. For example, Gift City is one striking example. So India will continue to be on the map of the GCC market. We have seen recently. I mean, there was some data which suggested that now the number of GCCs having $1 billion revenues has doubled over the last 2 years. From 12 earlier to 24 now. So there will be definitely there will be war for talent. Yeah. So I think we will have to look at how do we get the right people. How do we focus on training? So increasingly, you may find that you may not get somebody who is completely ready-made for the job, but how do we ensure that we train someone who is, say, even 50% ready? Yeah. So I think as we go further, as this whole war for talent happens, we will have to look at creative solutions rather than So that's one example on the sourcing side, on the hiring side. So you will have to run possibly, academies, training academies internally. Of course, depending on the size of, it's the size and scope of what you're doing. The other way could be in terms of working with partners. And in Quest itself, we have a very strong focus on GCCs. So we have incubated GCCs, as a business line which we want to support. So we could be a one-stop shop, for providing that support, right from hiring, training, ensuring that as attrition happens, we are able to sort of backfill. We are also in the process of supporting in terms of location identification, giving options in terms of depending on the cost model or where you want to be, which I mean. So that's when filing of returns. So pretty much the entire end-to-end one-shop solution is something which Quest itself offers, to potential organizations who want to set up GCCs in India. Yeah. So to coming back to your question, so we'll have to look at it pretty much end to end in terms of how do we get the right talent? How do we ensure that we are able to support the parent with higher value adding work? How do we ensure that whilst doing that we continue to keep an eye on the costs, because those challenges will always remain. And then finally, how do we ensure that we are ready for the next phase of work? So that's how GCCs have evolved and grown in the past. Yeah. So they've taken X work, they've done it well, they've embedded it, then they prepared for the next phase of work, and the next wave of work. Yeah. So how do we ensure that we constantly remain ahead of the curve by identifying newer areas of work which can be brought to India and which we can very well deliver in India, just because of the sheer number of talent we have and the multitude of talent we have across various fields. So those are some of the things I think we would have to keep in mind. And then of course, as I said, the government is very supportive. Yeah. So maximize locations, maximize states in India, which are supportive of subsidies or support in terms of whether hiring support or whether support in terms of the waiver of duties, taxes, all of that is has been a given model, and it's only accelerating. So let's continue to benefit from that also, from a cost perspective and adding value back to the parent.
No, I completely agree. The governments, if you look at yesterday, we had the chief minister for Maharashtra, Fadnavis was there yesterday.
Yes.
And he was talking about, the kind of, facilities which are being offered.
Absolutely.
And the kind of
including the innovation hub which he mentioned to
the
be set up
innovation
in
hub
Navi
which we
Mumbai.
are building up. And, thank you so much, Naozer, for speaking to us and, sharing your experience. And I think very important stuff you mentioned about people, the culture, the innovation, which is very important for the GCCs. And, once again, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. Thanks for tuning in to this special episode of Bhoom of Bharat. As we, bring in more leaders, GCC leaders from the industry to share about the experiences and how GCCs can add value. Please share your thoughts and feedback with us. You can reach me on SRK Game Changers on LinkedIn or on our website, srkgamechangers.com. Until next time, namaste.